Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome editor Richard Smither, who joins us to talk about their work on Pretty Lethal. Richard will talk us through how he went about cutting the dance sequences and the creative decisions he made in the edit. Please be warned about heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Richard. Hi, Richard. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Robert. Yeah, pleasure to be here.
We're here to talk about Pretty Lethal, which has recently come out on Amazon, but it's also had screenings at South by Southwest. How have you found the reception to the film?
I think it's been really positive. I think, it has a particular sort of kind of flavour, the film. It's very much a fun action film, to sit back and just switch off and have a good time. And I think the people that are up for that type of movie, I think are absolutely loving it. So that's been really positive.
I think because it's a film it's so brisk, right? Like it's an hour and 20 something minutes, which I feel like some TV show episodes could be that long.
Yeah.
But here you're in, out, and you can, I don't know, it just feels very, because of the brisk nature of it. It just makes, I don't want to say like because it's short, it's enjoyable. That sounds really bad, but I think because we're so used to having films so long now, that sometimes it feels a bit of a throwback to like 90s, where you would have films that have no fat on it and they're just really lean. It reminds me a little bit of like, because this was on TV over the weekend, was The Mask.
Yeah, you're right.
You
Yeah,
know,
I remember. Yeah, I agree. I'm of that age. Yeah, so I grew up with 80s first of all, and then 90s were my teenage years, learning about movies. But you're right. Yeah, films used to be a bit of a ride. Like an entertainment ride
yeah,
in and moving through. I mean, that was definitely one of the objectives of the producers and the kind of what the package of the film was. It's definitely designed to be a kind of exciting and thrilling 80s style action film, kind of a throwback to when films are there to give you a good time. So I think we achieved that. Pacing wise, you're always trying to it's not about fast. It should be always about just maintaining the audience's interest and not dropping the ball. Basically, if you let the pressure off a little bit. I have a little analogy of pacing on films, which is, I don't know if you remember the game, the Flappy Bird game, where the bird,
I think it's actually called Flappy Bird, isn't it?
that's right, yes. Yeah, so the bird is, once you drop lower, it takes a while to get back to where you are, and that's very much the same with the film energy. And if you lose the audience through maybe structural problems or a transitional problem, or you haven't explained something, or you're too quick or too slow, then it does take you quite a while to get back to where you were, and sometimes you never get back to where you were. So pacing is so important in terms of like making a film you want to watch more than once.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes, I'm sure we've probably, you were saying, it was like seeing films where it moves at like such a, not even a tortoise pace, because it can be so slow, and I think that's when you get lost, and you probably drift to like get your phone if you're watching in front of a TV rather than the cinema, which is I've been guilty of. But I think with something like this, which like what I was, my preconceived notion of the film would be that, oh, it's going to be action and dance. It's going to be fast cuts. It's going to be, you might miss the action or blink and something will happen. But not the case with Pretty Lethal. And I think you've noticed that within like the first frame where they have the first dance audition, is it's shot on a wide angle lens, and you allow the actors to show off their skill. And as the film goes by as well, you notice that in the action sequences, and um, yeah, it was really interesting to sort of see it in that sort of style. Um, But as an editor, do you relish those sort of would you relish allowing a scene to play out like that rather than fast chop cut?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'm like, I fell in love with film watching the 70s films and 80s and 90s. So I, and also I think, you know, Vicky is very much you know, a traditional filmmaker from that era where the camera's telling the story. And that's the sort of cinema I fell in love with, not quick cuts, not lots of camera angles, multiple cameras running, you know, where one camera is telling the story. So I don't want to get in the way of that. I want, you know, if it's engaging, there's no reason for me to edit. I won't touch it. I'm only editing for a reason, to add something. But otherwise, no, I don't think you should get in the way. The audience is engaged in something, and sometimes the longer you sit on something, the more thoughts they have and ideas, and they start adding things to the image. And if you're cutting all the time, you're almost taking up some of their brain power by chopping angles and changing things. There's a lot of geography, and it can become a bit overwhelming. So I think a big thing that comes into that as well is, like, you look at, you know, you can be watching a 200 million pound special effects film, and it can be a blizzard of edits, and 5 minutes into the film you check your watch, you know, and then you can be watching There Will Be Blood, and there might have been 2 cuts in the first 5 minutes, I don't know, 3 or 4 cuts, and you can't take your eyes off it. So it's engagement rather than speed, and it's really about captivating the audience.
Mm. And it's well, like in a streaming era where you need to make sure that you get people in the first few minutes and whatnot. And I think with Pretty Lethal, I've got a small dance background and not a martial arts one. So when you get to see these dance films, dancing in films, it's always curious to know how they do it. And sometimes in the back of my mind, it's like, how many hours did they rehearse to, get this opening scene or
Yeah,
a scene when they're sort of incorporating action into it as well? Because I just think like, wow, that must been like hours upon hours just to nail it.
it's a very difficult film, I think, to make this film. It's a very tricky film to make. So you've got 5 lead actresses playing ballerinas, and Maddie Ziegler, obviously, we have all seen in the Sea of videos, which is a world-class dancer. She's brilliant. And she had some ballet experience when she was younger. And Lana Condor, who plays Princess, also had done a little bit of ballet and had done some dance experience. But the other 3 girls didn't have as much, really. So even for someone like Maddie, portraying a ballerina, a professional top-class ballerina, is very difficult. So editorially, well, in terms of how they shot, actually, they would swap the actors out during a take. So you see some of these opening shots at the beginning where the girls are moving, and there'd be a sort of a contact point between Princess and Bones. Everything would stop in the take, and then the professional ballerinas would come in and take over some of the roles and then go on. That was kind of overwhelming at first when I looked at all this, because I hadn't seen any previews for the dancing scenes, and I was, you know, I didn't know what I was looking at first. I was kind of, okay, how am I going to track this? But they did it really well, and it allowed me to sort of intercut different shots, and always convince you that there are real ballerinas on screen.
When you have something like that, because you're not seeing the previews and you're sort of working on the idea, like getting the dailies and looking at it, where do you begin in sort of breaking down the scenes and thinking about how you will let the scene play out? You obviously need to think about when they switch between the body dancers, and whatnot, and you kind of need to hide that at the same time. But what do you do in your process and to sort of prepare for the day, and whilst you're working through it, working through the takes and thinking about, okay, this is where we might cut, or actually let's play this out 10 seconds longer and then cut it.
On that particular sequence, on the first dance, it was really sort of taking a bit of time to get to grips with how they were shooting it and how it worked and how I was swapping people out. And then pretty much I'm working in terms of chronology. So I'm probably going to watch through my rushes and start gapping out little bit of sections that I think are interesting or would work. I particularly liked Maddie Ziegler's dancing straight from the beginning, and she has a little solo moment. And I thought that would be good if we sonically changed the sound for her solo and try, because she's quite a powerful dancer. She has an energy that she has when she dances. And so I thought, okay, that could be quite good sound design moment for us, that everything dies down and she goes into her own little world. And then once I've got kind of like my highlights reel of little things that I think should go in there, it's really trying to sort of look through the other footage and bridge the gaps. So I know I've got my favorite bits, and I've got the bits that emotionally moved me or I found, visually interesting. And then it's how I build, and then I just start adjusting. It's rhythm as well. It's like I had a song to play onto the first dance, so it was kind of just, that was kind of interesting too, because the songs in the first and last dance aren't the songs that were played on set. And they weren't the songs that were in the assembly edit. And I was kind of thrown by that for a few moments, because I didn't understand how you could have such an intricate dance routine that wasn't exactly to a song. But the Will Tuckett, who did the ballet training, used a click track, and amazingly, once the beats on there, everything lined up.
That's kind of scary though, not knowing, using something completely different.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And I guess when you have a beat and we're having a click track, you can match to their movements. That must have been, at that moment when you heard that, it must have been like a proper.
The first week, they shot both the first and the end dance the first week, and I think into a fight scene. So I had a lot of different things to solve in the first week. So it was and I've never done dancing, and I've done fight scenes, but these are, I've got Vicky's work in and 87 North's work in. So it's a really high standard, and the expectations, as you can imagine, for the fight scenes were high of what I was producing. So the first week was kind of stressful but exciting too. With the music, it was really about, the first dance scene was always going to be a classical piece of music that they were dancing to in that wasn't so difficult. The final dance was, the on-set track was classical, but Vicky wanted something a bit more orchestral. So I had sort of went through my iTunes library and found the sort of piece of music I might listen to if I need a walk, to inspire me or something. And I kind of laid that over, and I really tried to hit Bones' solo in the final dance and make it feel like an ending. Really, it needed to feel sort of triumphant and thrilling and powerful. And when we got that in place, actually the ending started to work emotionally, and I was like, okay. And then I'd have to adjust all the edits. Very difficult the last dance, because the girls are doing such difficult moves. Often a few frames here and there, make the difference between selling the authenticity of the dancing.
And as an editor, because you haven't edited dance before, do you go back and watch other ballet dancers and other ballet videos? But are you worried that if you do watch it, do you worry that it might taint your decision making in the film?
So one thing I do know about editing is that all I have to rely on are my instincts. That's my power. I think that's any editor's power, that I'm completely relying on something that tells me yes or no or inspires me. So I tend to not try to get any external example to steer me. I want to just watch something and use my imagination. So maybe I could have done it, would have helped, but on certain things. But really, I'm looking at some of the same principles that you might use in action, I'm using on the dance. So I want to feel something, and I want to be moved, and I want to get inside the character's head, and I want to feel like I'm in the dance with them doing the moves. So no, I don't tend, even with previs and stuff, there was a previous editor for the fight scenes, but I wouldn't watch it before I did it, because I would never have my fresh feeling and I wouldn't use my instincts. And often I changed the fight stuff based off I just went where I wanted to go. And then at the end, when I put it together, I could look back and see what was done on set. But if you don't have your instincts, you don't have a lot. You're a bit lost. You got to really trust them.
That's an interesting point, though, that you didn't want to taint your sort of idea and relying on instincts. Because I guess with previs, when you have something like that up, you I guess for people who don't know what previs is, it's basically a like a rough shoot of rough idea of how you want the scene to be played out, with the way the shots and the way that might be cut, and also the music used. It varies from film to film. Sometimes just a VFX previs, and other times it might be just a simple storyboard, or other times it might be in the stunts workshop where they're recording it and sort of building up that way. I think it's interesting, going back to your point, like relying on your instincts rather than thinking about what somebody has done or what something as a preconceived notion might be. You're just sort of like, put that all to the side and we'll do what I know is best. And again, that's something that you've built up over the many years and working on different projects at the same time. It's not something that just happens like overnight where you wake up and like, yeah.
No, you have to, you have to develop your skills and train your instincts. I mean, you've always got the previs to go back to. So if you do your version and you hit a wall and you can't, or it's no good, or you've done your best go, and if I watched the previs and it was better than what I did, I would swap mine out for it, no problem, absolutely. But I might see something creative in there, maybe a character beat that isn't in the action design. I'm focused more on the feeling of the character and other things, or I might create a moment. There's a moment in there's a fight with Ossip and Bones, and she's pinned him on the ground. She's trying to stab him, and just the way I found things in the rushes to make it a bit more planned and choreographed as to what was going on, a bit more like cause and effect. You could see them one countering the other and changing things, and that's purely by watching it and going, well, what would I want to happen, rather than going, okay, well, what did they do?
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well, like, because editing, you're going through a point of view of different characters, and especially in something like this where you have the actors leading the story along with their actions, because they're trapped in the house. How are they going to get out? How can we communicate their thoughts and feelings? Because sometimes it is just looks or the way they might move to get out of the situation.
I think it's a lot of it's empathy, or it's mind reading, and it's feeling someone's feelings. I have to sit there and what's Bones feeling in this moment, and I'm editing through her. So in some ways, she's dictating the performance of the actor, or the camera's dictating the pace of on how I cut. So it's really connecting to the film as you're sitting there, and then it's beginning to channel and tell you what to do. There's one of the biggest things that you have to be really wary of is imposing yourself on something else, especially if you haven't designed that, if you haven't got that connection yet to a film. It happens a lot with people, maybe when they're starting out a bit more and they have a little bit less experience. You try to mold it too much into something, but really it is talking to you, and you have to, you've got all these rhythms coming at you and all these different things. You have to really tune in. Really is tuning in and listening, and then letting it guide you and inspire you. I think that's really key.
I think it's quite wise words there, and I guess as someone who has that experience, you obviously look at it in a different way, but then also if you come back to it and one moment it actually might work on this idea, but then the next moment it might not work, because I guess if it's one scene and then you move on to the next scene, there needs to be a bit more sort of synergy between the two, and then you kind of work it out that way. But I like those moments though where you are sort of portraying the sort of feelings of the characters, and there's a very good balance and act in the film between the people knowing what's going on and then people not knowing going on. And I think not knowing what's going on, I think even this is in the writing and also in the edit, it's like you could either push it along to show that everybody's back on the same page, or you just let it play out so that you don't need to sort of hold hand the audience in how the story is going to unfold.
Yeah, that's definitely if the audience is kind of, if you're ahead of the film, then you're in trouble, aren't you? If everyone's sort of, everything's predictable and it's a slow reveal at the right time, and keeping little secrets, creating little nuggets. Devorah's storyline was very interesting for that, because we really built that up a lot before we started the film, of creating the film originally was a bit more, the action scenes were still there, but you didn't have Devorah's background and story. So it was kind of feeling like we needed something mentally to pull us through the film and to intrigue us while the girls were hiding. So we definitely drilled into that and creating that backstory where she lost a leg and she had revenge and she wanted to bring this guy here. So that you have a mystery that's playing with the action. and that gives you your ending, because you kind of build your A and B storyline up, and then you have a kind of crescendo at the ending of the movie.
Yeah, and I guess as a as an editor as well, how do you balance between the two storylines? Because you need to think about you don't want to push this, you don't want to push it too quickly, but you want every moment, every person to have their moment to shine. And do you sort of create a board of like, I can imagine picturing it as like two timelines: the timeline of a group are downstairs and hiding, and then, or even three timelines. Then you have another character who doesn't know what's going on, and then you've got Firma's character who wants revenge. How do you balance between those three timelines and sort of then amalgamate them together to create the whole story?
A lot of it's a feeling thing, and doing it in section by section, breaking the film into sort of 5-minute sections, 10-minute sections. We did a lot of reordering of the scene ordering and moving things around. The biggest thing we did really towards the end, because we actually took out a big subplot where Zoe and Chloe left the inn, and went off in a police car, and there was a big police chase, and we had to bring the film down for time. So we'd lost a kind of a crescendo moment where Lothar was chasing in his car Zoe and Chloe back to the house. So we had to, once we removed that storyline, we had to recreate a crescendo by intercutting the other scenes in a way that was still ascending in terms of tension. We kept getting into positions where we were going up, and then would feel like it would have a little lull or a backstep. So Vicky would often draw a graph plotting the intercutting that we were doing and trying to create this kind of ascending tension. But often you can do a lot of this in your head. The more you do, I mean, people in editorial use scene cards a lot, and I used to use them quite a lot. But after a while, you kind of hold the film in your head a bit more easily, and you can kind of feel your way through how to order things.
And I guess when you're sort of thinking about ordering as well, like I can imagine that sometimes you may have like one idea of it, and then actually when it plays out, like doesn't just work. We need to tweak it just here, and a lot of sort of back and forth on stuff, because like editing, is also like a fine balance of like where you want the story to go. Even though you do have all the footage, but that's just the clay. You're sort of molding it into the vase, and how the final thing will play out. I do like the sort of, I know you don't use it now, but like note card sections as well. I can imagine when you're doing that previously, sort of building up an idea of not being able to get lost, especially like here where I know it's predominantly in one location, the film, but I can imagine you can get lost with whose story that you're telling to, or how much you want to tell before you cut back to the others. And I think that maybe it also comes down to a director's decision of like, in the script, that actually we've only got a page here with this part. Maybe we can extend it to a couple of pages because we've got the footage. Then we'll go back to the other group afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of reordering. Also, we would do things like we would create extra story beats to bridge those, to kind of create those kind of transitions that you're talking about, keeping the energy flow. One big one we were doing is, because Devorah's story was kind of adapted before we started shooting, we were asked to sort of fill in some more background to what happened to her. So one of the ideas was that we would retell using sound the moment when Devorah got shot in her leg and lost her leg. So we had a scene where we're trying to think about where in the film could we position this, because you didn't have any material to create that. We found a scene of Devorah when she's talking to Pasha at the bar, and she finds out that Lothar's coming, and she does this sort of eye stare, and she starts to begin to look into the distance. So we thought we could use the stare that she's got, because she's obviously thinking about something. And then we took a shot earlier that we used when Bones first gets in the bar, and we see a young Devorah on the wall in a photo, and we flopped that shot, and we put a different photo of Devorah, much younger, in the wall. So we had Devorah staring, and then we cut to a picture of her when she was young, staring. So she's almost looking back in time. And then we created a sort of a build of orchestral music, as if she was in the backstage of her first show. And then we used a gunshot, and we used that to transition to her sitting in front of her box, which she had her ballet costume inside. And we happened to find with Uma was concentrating and just staring ahead before action. It's one of those moments that you're lucky to find. So we had the stare, we cut to the photo, we had a cut, and then she's staring again. That bridged those two moments, and then she opens her box, and you see her old ballet outfit. So this is where you have to maybe sometimes create moments to fill in backstory, but also create a transition that's kind of cool. It's like having a little toolkit, you know, when you learn film editing, little tricks and that you can use, techniques you can use to get things in and sell your ideas. There's a good thing about expositions, a lot like vegetables. I can't remember who gave me that, or Brussels sprouts. I remember that one. It's really good. So you need, if you want to get your vegetables in, you need to surround it with meaty, tasty foods. Otherwise, so that's kind of where film technique comes in. If you want to get little bits of information in, make it entertaining. The classic one, obviously, is Terminator, when James Cameron put all of the background exposition in the car chase, which I thought was genius. So you don't even know that, you're not even aware of it, when a bad film would sit there and just tell you stuff, and you're like nodding off.
That's quite good, actually. Brussels sprouts into your meal.
Got to be careful. You've got to be really careful. People don't want too much of it, and not for too long. You've got to keep it really concise and short. And if you can make it entertaining, or you can add another flavor to the dish and give it something else to distract people from what they're eating, that's probably better.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I really enjoy that. I'm going to steal that one now, because I feel like, I don't know, there's as like an editor, as you said, you need to find those moments where you could bridge the gap, and parts of it I can. Probably part of it. It's like this. It's probably a stressful part, but also a really fun part of the job, because you need to bridge the two, but then also you're being a bit more creative in a way that you want to show off your style as well, because it's all well and good that they could shoot something. It's like, how can we actually make sure that it flows together, and then add not the Brussels sprouts, the Richard spice into the stew, so that people can enjoy
sprouts. Spice your sprouts. Yeah, it's if you, once you know how to do it, it's exciting. It's an opportunity, isn't it? You might be slightly nervous and go, well, how do I do it? But you can do it, and you have techniques to do it, and it feels good. Yeah, because you are creating something. You're not just repurposing a script or what's on set. You are helping the writing and the storytelling of the film. If you've got good, strong storytelling instincts as an editor, you're going to be very useful to whoever you're working with, because you can fix things and smooth things out that someone else might have to reshoot or pick up.
Yeah, and I guess as an editor as well, like looking at what you're creating and doing, is like you might be giving another option to the director in terms of, well, I know you have this in mind, but if you just watch this back, maybe this bridges it just a bit better. What do you think? And that sparks something in their head to be like, this could be right or wrong, or actually play around with it a bit more and see if we can incorporate it a bit more.
Yeah, that's the my favorite bit, and why I love films, is the sitting. When you get to sit with a director. Vicky is very collaborative and good fun to sit next to, and full of ideas herself. So actually, when we get into the kind of problem solving area, is when I have the most fun. When we start coming up and solving things and changing things, that's the exhilarating part, and that's why films often give you that time as an editor to sit and problem solve and improve things that you might not get on a tighter schedule.
Yeah, and if you're working on a schedule, or even working on something that's very tight schedule, because I don't know about this film. I know it was at South by Southwest, but if you are looking at being in a film festival like that, there must be a certain deadline that you need to meet. That probably adds even more pressure and stress into what you're doing.
We're actually quite lucky. We hadn't sold the film when we finished it. So we finished it in April last year, and we kind of locked it, and all the music was done and everything was done. So we were quite happy with where we were. And then the film was sold, and it went to Amazon, and then Amazon bought the film, and then I was brought back for 3 weeks, and Amazon had some more notes, and there were a few more producer notes, pretty much about speeding the film up a bit and getting it a bit leaner. So we did 3 weeks of those notes, and then that was the tight deadline, those 3 weeks, because they wanted to get it out and get it released. where it was last week, and then a few months after, a month after, we found out he got into South by Southwest, so that was amazing, headlining. So that's really a highlight.
Yeah, and it feels funny because I've sort of spoken to other people at festivals. If they were going to Sundance, for example, they're like, I need to make sure that it's done by a certain point in December. But then also in December, you've got Christmas coming up, but then you've also got Thanksgiving. I guess here it's a different kind of schedule. But when you get brought back for those sort of additional 3 weeks, do you feel because you've had so much time away from the film, you're coming back with like a fresh set of eyes and sort of maybe different ideas or something that you might have thought of, I don't know, 6 months afterwards when you wake up in a cold sweat being like, I wish I did this now?
It probably, I mean, you come back and you're a bit less tired and probably a bit less battle weary from the long edit, so you're a bit more open to new things. That's probably what it is. I was aware that there were changes that we had to make, and then I could bring a real positive attitude and kind of look at the film, as you said, from a fresh perspective, and really just focus on delivering what they were asking us to do, as well as possible, and keep the film as in the quality as high as possible. So that helps. I think if you've been on a very long edit and it's been, you can be a bit more precious to things and held on to things a little bit more, but definitely was a bit more freshness and kind of excited to work on film again, really, and collaborate with people. It was good fun.
And I bet you as well, like in a way, it feels nice that they've asked you back and not got another editor in who could sort of change things around. But as you said, having that freshness, it must create such a different perspective, being like, okay, I'm ready to take on these 3 weeks, knowing that I've got a different I could have a different idea. I know, minute 5 to minute 25, it works perfectly. We don't need to worry about that. Let's concentrate on the sort of micros of it all and make sure that's all ready and Amazon are happy.
It was really about listening to what the notes were and kind of interpreting what they were asking us to do, and where they wanted us to go, and then trying to sort of put that to best use in the film. So it's still interpreting it through us, but delivering what they're asking us for. Because at that point, obviously, they own the movie. At that point, you're not isolated in an edit room working with the producers. It's been sold, and it's going to, you've got 3 weeks and it needs to be turned around. So you need to really be on top of it. But I think Amazon loved the film. That was really positive, and I think Vicky had a good relationship with Amazon, so that ended up.
I wonder what some of those conversations must be like at first with Amazon when they watch it and the notes. I can imagine that being quite nerve-wracking as well, because you don't want, your baby to be completely taken apart by execs who might not understand it or might be a slave to an idea rather than actually, like, sometimes not. It's the art of things.
I think we were very lucky with this because Amazon really loved the movie, and Vicky had a really good communication with them, and they wanted the best for the film, so we were in a good position. It wasn't a purchase where they wanted to really turn it into something else. It was a really good occasion. I guess if you did have a position where someone didn't like the boom as much, then you might be in trouble. But luckily, in this case, it wasn't that. I think we were very much looked after.
And again, having that, it probably makes it more for yourself, like, confident going into the edit suite with their notes and interpretations, knowing that they do like it, and then it's just final tweaks, really, isn't it? It's just how do I make sure that it's just good enough for
it's pacing, really. It's really sort of speeding up the opening and pacing the film up. That was mainly the sort of notes and the push, and it's a quick film. It's pacey, and I think for the type of film that is, that kind of, it works for it. Again, it's like do Trainspotting's under 90 minutes? I think I'm true. I hope I haven't made a mistake there, but you think about how great that film is.
Do you know what's funny? I was actually thinking about it the other day, and I was thinking about, I think including credits, it's an hour. It's 94 minutes, but
it's incredible.
Close enough.
I never had. You finished the film. It's perfect. And my first thought when the film's paced properly, perfectly, is I want to watch it again. And I always think of like great songs, like, you know, when I was growing up, Prince would always, you know, I'd want to watch some, I'd want to, I could hear it 1,000 times and it's still good. And I think great films usually they've kept your attention the entire time and never overstayed it. Even if it's 3 hours, Godfather or Fellowship of the Ring was a good one for me when I was younger, when I was a teenager. You just, yeah, I just think that thing about wanting to put it back on and study it and watch it again, I think that's a good barometer.
Yes, and I think as well, like with something like this, it's, you know, for me, if I going back to watch it again, would be the sort of is the dance scenes and the fight scenes and how everything's sort of linked together with the story as well, which I'm also curious to know about. Sorry, going back, like linking and during certain scenes is like the VFX element, because there is a sort of drug tripping scene where we see the sort of nutcracker elements come alive. How do you incorporate VFX in the edit, and how do you, you know, once you get VFX's final cut on it and start inserting it into your cut, does your thinking change a little bit, or do you know from the off what the intention is?
There is an intention for some of it, but you can still have ideas. So that Nutcracker is quite interesting. There's a section with where Bones is about to be attacked by Ossip, and he's come and leaning over Grace, and she looks up and she sees a hallucination. And both the Nutcrackers were supposed to come alive, but then when we spoke in the edit and we talked about it, you know, the idea was, well, wouldn't it be cool if they've seen a lot of bad things here and they tell her to run? You know, so it's kind of great, makes it a bit more spooky. You know, you make this like this dark little room, and it's kind of we tried to make the fairy tale and the ballet become part of the story. So it kind of added an extra element. And then Ossip's face changed and he looked like the devil. That was a thing that we worked on. I can't remember if that was there before or after we had the idea, but certainly she calls him that. I think it was there before. And his eyes go and his face changes. So some of the visual effects are already designed in the script, and sometimes they're ideas you have when you're working on it. We had a lot of face replacements in different places and dances, and not really the fight scenes. I can't remember. Fight scenes they did a brilliant job choreographing the fight scenes for interchanging the actors, and I wouldn't often tell. I couldn't tell. The beginning of the Bones fight is a stunt performer on Ossip's back, and I didn't know. I just kept watching it. It's so convincing. I just didn't notice.
But again, that's just people's craft and how good they are, right? If you don't notice that you as an editor sort of are lost in the performance rather than,
Yeah, it was
wait a
great.
second, it's someone else, or it's, you know, it's a stunt double, or if this is the actual actor or actress on it.
Yeah, definitely. I had sort of 3 big fight scenes, and they were all fantastic. They're all very different. First one's very much full of dread and tension. Second one is a ensemble, and it's a mix of probably the first one and the third one. It's kind of they begin to find their feet. Quite interesting with the second one. There was a choice not to have music at the beginning of the fight, just sound design, and that came from, as I was assembling the film, there's a lot of the girls hiding and whispering, which required tension music underneath. And then when I began to put the fight scene on the front and lay the soundtrack out for the assembly, I just felt that we'd been on the music for too long. You know, been a lot of music already, and the fight scene was going to be long. And there's a classic thing about wearing out your audience, diminishing returns. And I thought, oh no, it'd be better if we stop this. And I think I always love the cave troll scene in Fellowship of the Ring. There's a moment when they're in the mines of Moria and you hear the drums coming, and then they're waiting for the orcs to come in. The music builds, and then the door bursts, and you just have sound design, and all the orcs flush in. And I remember being in the cinema when I was a kid. Well, I was well, not a kid, in my 20s actually, still a child actually. Yeah. And that just overwhelming me, the sound and the chaos of that. So when we did the second fight scene, as the door burst through and the guys came, cut the music, and just had the girls and all of the sound design, which was a bit scary for everyone because they weren't used to potentially not having a song there or music. It's a bit different, but what allowed you is to have a little break and sell the kind of danger of the fight. And then we got to bring music back in on Grace when she puts her princess headband in. And then you've had a gap now, so now it's going to have an effect when you bring the music back. And then that built to a crescendo when Bones cuts his throat. And I think if we hadn't had the gap, I think the feeling you have at the end with the crescendo would have been lesser. So not using music is important too. And obviously we had Glenn Fremantle's sound team on it at Pinewood, who are, you know, Glenn's team won Oscars, so we had like a brilliant sound team. So it's a great opportunity to hand it over to like world-class sound designers, and they were brilliant.
I guess as well, like it's interesting the sort of comparisons that you use to something for like Lord of the Rings, and sort of going back to again experience and seeing things, and how like a soundtrack could be overpowering, or do you know what, use the sound design and maybe we could just build it up. I love sound design. I've started to get more of appreciation for sound in films since I started doing this podcast, because you don't realize the layers that people put in. So again, when you're saying about something like this where they're going to be building up and hushing, it's like you said, don't give too much for the audience, allow the sound design to sort of build up on it, and then, you know, go from there.
It's interesting that, so I definitely, I mean, I have listened to a lot of editor podcasts, and some of the best in the world, and you know, you hear about landscaping the music and the sound, so that's definitely got into my head as I've, you know, as you listen to other experts and what they're saying. But also it really is like, a lot of it is the feeling you had as a viewer. It's so I'm so built off my experiences when I fell in love with films and watched something, and then how did I feel, and what made, if I go back and examine it, why did I feel that? Why did I feel that in The Matrix? You know, when I was in the cinema, why did that blow my mind? What made that moment work? You know, and can I take the techniques that we used there and put it into what I'm doing? Big one that I always remember of The Matrix is there's a feeling I got when in the first one, when Neo saves Trinity and he wraps the helicopter, the bungee around his arm, and the helicopter comes down and crashes into the wall. And there's a build in the music, and it's kind of repetitious, but it's getting higher and higher and repeating itself. And it's the same feeling I had at the end of the first Star Wars film, A New Hope, when the Death Star goes up. So that was interesting. You start to study that and go, okay, well, why? How did I feel the same thing here and here? And it's this sort of, it's a slow build of tension. You need time, and you need to repeat something, and then it gets a bit bigger and a bit bigger, and then it goes down, and then it comes up and goes there. It's little formulas that you can pick up for why something, you know, makes you extremely happy.
Again, it's like the inspiration that you can get from other people and other films, that you can incorporate into your work. I think that's always like that's a great thing about art, is how you can sort of maybe not cherry pick, but sort of have things that will spark an idea in your mind, being like, save that for later in my head, and then you realize actually this is actually quite useful. That if I figure out from this scene that if they've used, you know, suck the music out from here, or how did I feel when I first saw that? Like how can I do the same thing for people who would be watching this film if it's in the cinema or at home?
I feel like I'm the viewer when I'm editing. I'm making the film for me. I'm making it. I'm in terms of editing. If I'm on my own, if I'm doing my assembly, I'm making it for me. I'm manipulating my thoughts and feelings and controlling me as a viewer. So that's what I'm channeling. I want it to be, if it's funny, you know, I want it to be funny for me. If I want to, you know, if I want to add tension to something, I will try and design it to do that. Just trying to make the most of it and manipulate the audience and pull them into where you want them to go.
I feel like you probably have the best job because you're getting paid to make a film for yourself, and get to see all these things.
For a while, then you work with the director, and then it changes. But certainly on the assembly, you get to, unless you're getting notes regularly, and luckily on this one I didn't. You're really getting to put your stamp on it. This is what I mean about not looking at previses and other things, because you only have one opportunity for a first impression, and your instincts are better than your conscious thought. There's something in your instincts, and often they rush us with assemblies, but assemblies are so important. If you've got time to really put your first idea down properly, often you can get something in there that you might not get ever again, because often you're stressed and you're tired and you're working to a deadline, but you are going to channel something. An idea will come by creating the diamond, by compressing and creating pressure. You're going to come up with something cool that might last all the way to the end.
Yeah, that's a good, interesting point with that, and having that sort of compression and whatnot. I feel like, you know, as you said, like working on your assembly and then sitting down with the director and how they are going to be viewing the film. I guess with assembly, it's probably a lot of fun knowing that you're doing it for yourself. You can have these ideas, and it's kind of like it feels like you're throwing a lot of things on the wall, hoping some of it will stick, and then seeing what else could actually change for an idea to stick, or to then just completely chuck it out the window.
You wanna, I mean, if you get time, sometimes you don't have time, but if you have time, if you do your assembly properly and you get it to a good standard, you quickly see what works and doesn't work. If you don't get time to put your assembly the way it should be, number one, you scare your director, who gets depressed. That's never a good start. But also, things that should work don't work because they're not ready in the assembly and you haven't found it. So you get a bad read on the film and you slow yourself down. What you want to do, if you're lucky enough, is to start on a positive director who's excited, and then you begin to target the problems that are in the movie quickly, and it gets you ahead in the fine cut. So I think it's well worth giving people time to get an assembly that's right, if they have the feeling of it, of where they want to go to. If it's more rough and they want to keep it rough and they don't work that way, then yeah, dive in. But you can often solve problems straight away, you know, rather than leave them all in there. Get rid of as many things as possible and then see what you're left with, rather than create lots of problems.
I think that's another interesting way of looking at things, and how you're sort of fine tuning, yeah, ideas and what people are sort of want us telling the story, and also what they might have seen, as you said, what might be a problem at the time, to
Yeah.
sort of course correct it. I guess it feels like the sort of opposite of like fix it in post in a way.
We saw when we first watched the film, it a lot of what's in there at the end is in there, you know, in terms of the feeling. Like, it was bigger, it was emotional because there was more content. We had to remove things because it's an action film, so there were more beats, character beats, which, you know, as you tighten the film up, some of those have to go depending on where they are in the movie in terms of the structure. But really, generally, it was very much about tightening the beginning, and then we had a lot of restructuring and simplifying in the last sort of half an hour. That was a lot of work. The first few weeks were hard on this film. It was difficult, and once we got it into a sort of shape, then we begun to really enjoy ourselves. But figuring out how to solve some of the narrative stuff and where to move things there were a few tense days where we were sort of scratching our heads, going, "This is difficult." But then you get it, and it really is like turning something and getting it in a slot. You know, you have to kind of find the shape that it fits, and then you find the next bit. Sometimes it isn't. You can't outthink it. You just need to start putting things together, and then doing another pass, another pass. It's problem solving. It's hard, and it's putting the hours in.
Yeah, and I can imagine as well as like creatively problem solving, and as again coming down to yourself as a what's it called, the experience of an editor as well, in getting it all together.
You've got to do two things. You've got to be able to spot what the problem is, which not everyone can do. And the second thing is, once you spot what the problem is, you have to have the courage to tackle it rather than leave it. And then the third thing is, you need to come up with a solution. You can miss one of those three things and leave something in a film. So you can leave problems in a film, or leave sections, or bad structural problems, or story problems. So what's wrong? And then you have to actually take it on, because it can be quite daunting sometimes, you know? And then you have to figure out what's the coolest way of, how do I fix this?
And I guess as well, like as an editor, the sort of problem solving of it all as well is it's just another creative way of doing it and figuring it out. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how, like, hearing you speak about it and the ideas coming from you and what you've done on the film, and how you sort of got from A to B, and the overall sense of it all. And just to sort of end this episode, what was your favourite scene to work on?
I really enjoyed the Ossip fight, which was the first fight with Bones, because I had that sort of the day before I showed it to Vicky for the first time. I'd sketched the scene out, but I hadn't cut it, so I was under quite a lot of pressure to turn it into something, and I knew it needed to sort of earn its ending. Just having it come together with the music, and I'd moved some of Grace's scenes, and we're cutting away to Grace during the fight. So I'd kind of instinctively, as I said about not following the previs, because then, you know, I was feeling the fight out as I watched it, and then I was deciding when I wanted to go cut away and come back. So I was keeping the tension there. And then when I had that working and I built all the music, you know, all the tech music in and the crescendo at the end, I was quite proud of myself, because we didn't really change that fight. The fight scenes didn't really change too much from the assembly period. We cut them down. The Bones fight hardly changed, maybe one shortening of it. We cut the basement fight down quite a bit in terms of beats, a little bit of reordering at the end. And then the bar fight, which was amazing, it was just rhythm and we just chopped through it a bit, got through it quickly, but they were all great. The stunt team, the action team, the cinematographer, the production design on this film were amazing, and we had great actresses and actors. So it was a very lucky job, and I was really excited to get it, and I'm happy that it's come out, and people who are into action films with ballerinas kicking ass, they're enjoying it. So that's good.
I think you chose some solid choices there, but then also, I guess I feel like it's a bit. I like asking a question about what somebody's favorite scene would be, but then also I feel like it's a little bit like asking your favorite kid, who's your favorite child, and why. And it's like just probably moments where it just differs, especially when you're working on certain things where maybe one scene was quite easy to do, but then the next one is harder. But then maybe the easier scene went not as fun because it, you know, you've done it and you move on. Was a harder scene, you're kind of thinking about it more and
The hardest scene might be your favorite scene once you finished it. If you do a good, if you think you've done a good job, you know, it might be terrible. You know, it might be painful when you're doing it, but the end result's good, and then it might be your favorite thing, because you might look back and go, okay, oh, that's under pressure, under time pressure, getting it right, changing things, coming up with it. Then you look back and go, okay, I'm proud of that. I could do that with a day, you know, just the day before. Yeah.
And it again, it probably, like as you said, with those harder scenes, probably at the time you're probably thinking, no, this is I don't know how I'm gonna tackle this.
Always, yeah, it's just terror. It's like terror, and then you know, afterwards when you've got it right, you're like, of course. You're like, of course it was going to be good. But literally 99% of the time I'm sitting there going, okay, this is hard, and what am I doing, and how am I going to get there? And I'm tense, you know, drinking a lot of coffee, and then it clicks, and then when it clicks and it starts singing back at you and it's working, it's a great feeling, and you're relieved.
Yeah.
And you know you won't have to do it again. That's the great thing. When you get it right, you're like, I've got it.
Until someone hands you a note and you're like, oh.
Yeah. Depends who you work for. Yeah, exactly. What people's tastes are.
Exactly. Richard, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for talking to me.
Pretty Lethal streaming now on Amazon. Yeah, go out and watch Richard and his team's amazing work. Thank you again, Richard.
Thank you, Robert. Take care.
You take care, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.